The apartment door was still locked, but something inside had already been taken. A stolen car. A wedding bill disguised as love. A family that called their cruelty responsibility. One missing key. One unauthorized bank alert. One sister crying on cue. And one woman, finally done being the family vault. But here's the real question. What happens when the person who's always cleaned everyone's mess stops? What happens when the one they depend on learns the truth about loyalty, money, and manipulation? And what if the line between love and exploitation was crossed years before anyone noticed? This isn't a story about a car. This is a story about the moment someone realizes they were never a daughter. They were a resource. My name is Harper Lane, 30 years old, and in my family I was always the one who figured things out. I knew where every spare key lived, which bill could be postponed without blowing a late fee, and how much cash had to stay in the shop's register to keep my father from pacing all night. Nobody ever said it out loud, but the rule was simple. If something went wrong, I handled it. They called me independent, which was just another way of saying everyone else gets to lean on you. I lived alone in a small one-bedroom in Oregon. Second-hand couch, stubborn rice cooker, and a whiteboard on my fridge with 3 columns. What I owe, what I'm owed, and what I'm done doing for free. My day job at a logistics company was steady, practical. On the side, I kept the books for my parents' small supply shop because I'd been good with numbers since childhood. That wasn't praise. It was assignment. Growing up above the shop taught me that numbers never lied. People did. My younger sister, Elise, was the fragile one, the emotional one. My parents treated her sensitivity like a medical condition. One wrong look and she melted. When she got a B+, we celebrated. When I got an A, Dad asked why it wasn't higher. If Elise forgot her lunch, the shop closed so Mom could drive it to her. When I forgot mine, Mom told me to be resourceful. By 13 I swept floors for $5 an hour. By 14 I reconciled the cash drawer. By 15 I was fixing mistakes I didn't even make. When Elise turned 16, she got a used convertible to build confidence. When I cracked my phone screen, I paid for the replacement myself. So when she texted me asking to come over and talk wedding budgets, I already knew exactly how that conversation would end. Even after a 10-hour shift, I went, because habit is heavier than exhaustion. Chamomile tea for Elise, black coffee for Mom, and a legal pad placed neatly in front of me like I was the family accountant. Elise slid a vendor folder across the table. Floral arches, photographers, a ceremony setup that cost more than the car I drove. $18,000. They didn't even pretend to hesitate before assuming I'd pay. When I said no, really said it, the entire room went silent. Elise blinked rapidly, Mom stared at Dad, and Dad studied the floor like it had answers. Dinner ended in ice. As I walked to my car, a used luxury sedan I'd worked years to buy, I noticed mud on the tire, something sticky on the handle. Brushed it off. Ignored the warning in my chest. The next night, I learned why it felt wrong. Elise had borrowed my car without permission, and returned nothing. And that was the moment something inside me, something buried under years of being the reliable one, finally snapped into focus. The air outside the cafe felt colder than it should have. Maybe it wasn't the temperature. Maybe it was the space finally forming between me and the life I'd carried for too long. When I walked to my car, my repaired, reclaimed car, I noticed the same thing I'd felt that first night after Nora stole it. The world was quieter when you stopped explaining yourself. But quiet doesn't last in a family built on expectations. By midweek, strange things began happening at the shop. Small things, subtle enough that anyone else would have ignored them. But I'd grown up learning that nothing small stays small for long. A delivery invoice went missing. A supplier called saying a payment was short again. A box of scanner rolls had been opened and scattered like someone wanted it to look like an accident. When I confronted my father, he looked genuinely confused. When I confronted my mother, she got defensive. When I confronted Nora, she avoided eye contact completely. Something wasn't right. That night, after the shop closed, I stayed behind pretending to finish the week's numbers. That's when I heard footsteps. Too light to be my father's, too hesitant to be my mother's, too familiar to ignore. Nora. She froze when she saw me standing near the back office. "What are you doing here?" she asked, like I'd walked into her home instead of our family's business. "I should ask you the same thing," I said calmly. She swallowed hard. Her eyes flicked toward the safe, toward the register, toward the receipts I'd placed on the desk earlier. Then she exhaled, long and shaky, like something inside her finally cracked. "I needed money," she whispered. "Zach lost his job last month. He didn't tell you because he's embarrassed." I expected anger. I didn't expect a confession. "So you're messing with the shop?" I asked, voice low. "No. She looked away. "Mom said you'd never help if we asked. She said this was the only way to make you understand." There it was. The pattern resurfacing like a stain. When a Charles woman needed something, I was the extraction plan. "Why didn't you just talk to me?" I asked. "Because you always say no now," she snapped, finally meeting my eyes. "You changed." "No. Y correcta sufli. I finally stopped drowning. Her face twisted, not in guilt, not in shame, but in realization. Before she could answer, the front bell chimed. Late, too late for normal customers. My pulse kicked up. Nora stepped closer instinctively. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. A man's voice echoed from the front. Is the owner here? Someone filed a formal discrepancy report. Nora's face drained of color. Police. Not for the stolen car. Something else. Something bigger. And as the silhouette of the officer appeared at the end of the aisle, I knew this wasn't about a short payment or a missing invoice. Someone had filed a fraud complaint under the shop's name. And my name was on every financial file. Nora whispered, terrified. Justine, what did you do? I didn't answer. Because for the first time in my life, I genuinely didn't know. The officer stepped fully into the aisle, the badge catching a flicker of the overhead light. His expression wasn't hostile, but it wasn't casual either. It was the kind of face you only see when someone has come prepared with information you don't know they have. Justine Charles, he asked. Nora stepped back like my name was a detonator. Yes, I answered. I need to speak with you regarding a report filed through the State Business Oversight Office. It concerns unusual financial activity tied to this shop. Unusual. A word that could mean anything. A word that could bury a small business. My father appeared from the stockroom, eyes widening at the officer's uniform. Is there a problem? The officer glanced at Nora, then back at me. Is there somewhere private we can talk? We moved into the back office. The walls felt closer than usual, the air heavier. The officer placed a folder on the table, thin but not thin enough. These documents were submitted anonymously, he said, sliding the file toward me. 3 inconsistencies flagged in the last quarter. Inventory numbers not matching purchase orders. Payments made, but no product received. And a tax-deductible expense claim for equipment that doesn't exist. My stomach tightened, not because of guilt, but because I recognized something immediately. These weren't mistakes. They were patterns. Patterns I cleaned up for years. Patterns I'd assumed were just sloppy bookkeeping. Patterns I never questioned because fixing things had always been my job. But now the state was questioning them for me. My father looked stunned. Officer, this must be a misunderstanding. My daughter handles all our books. This isn't about your daughter's accounting, the officer interrupted gently. It appears someone has been using the gaps to redirect funds. Redirect. A polite word for theft. I flipped through the pages. Numbers. Dates. Vendor names. And then, a signature. Not mine, but close. Close enough to fool someone who didn't know the curve of my handwriting. Nora inhaled sharply behind me. I didn't, I swear. I didn't say it was you. I whispered, though my pulse didn't believe myself. My mother suddenly appeared in the doorway. What's going on? The officer straightened. Ma'am, we have reason to believe someone connected to this shop has been siphoning small amounts of money over a long period of time. Tens, sometimes hundreds at a time. Spread out. Almost invisible. My father lowered himself into a chair like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. I kept flipping the pages, line after line, until one vendor name punched the air out of my lungs. Garden and Grove Events. Nora's wedding venue. A series of small consultation fees. $140 here. $220 there. $90 on a weekday morning. All paid from the shop's business account. Not enough to notice individually. But together? Thousands. I felt the room tilt. Nora whispered. Justine, please don't say anything. The officer watched us with quiet suspicion. This wasn't just carelessness. This wasn't a one-time theft. This was a pattern of misappropriation tied directly to my family, possibly pinned on me. Miss Charles, the officer said carefully. Do you know who might have had access to these accounts? I looked at Nora, then my mother, then my mother, then my father. And for the first time in 30 years, I realized the truth. Everyone had access. Only I had accountability. My voice came out steady. My voice came out steady. Steady in that terrifying way a building stays upright just before collapsing. Yes, I said. I know exactly who had access. The officer waited. But before I could answer, a loud crash erupted from the front of the shop, like someone kicking the door open. The officer reached for his holster. My father stood. My mother froze. And Nora whispered, barely audible. Oh my God, he's here. The officer edged toward the front, hand hovering over his holster. Another crash. This one sharper, more deliberate. Metal against wood. My father whispered. That's the back door. Which meant whoever was here didn't walk in. They knew the shop. They knew the shortcuts. They knew exactly where to enter without being seen from the street. The officer motioned for us to stay put and stepped into the hall. But I already knew who it was. Not because of evidence. Because of the silence that followed Nora's whisper. A silence only guilt creates. Then footsteps. Heavy. Confident. Too confident for someone innocent. The office door slammed open so hard the frame rattled. Zach stood there, face red, shirt damp with sweat, a stack of crumpled papers in his fist. "Give it back," he snarled at me. "All of it." The officer returned instantly, gun drawn but not raised. "Sir, step away from her." Zach didn't. His eyes locked on me with a kind of desperation that felt deeper than anger. "You think you can just shut it down?" he hissed. "You think you can ruin the one thing we had left?" My mother gasped. "What did you do?" Zach laughed sharp cracked. "What she didn't do. I was fixing your books, lady. Balancing what Justine kept pretending didn't exist." My father stepped forward. "You stole from us." Zach's jaw twitched. "I borrowed from a system that was already broken." The officer tightened his stance. "Sir, put the papers down." But Zach wasn't looking at him anymore. He was staring at Nora. "You were supposed to tell her," he said. "You were supposed to explain. You promised." Nora shook her head, tears rising. I didn't think you'd actually take the money. I thought you were bluffing." "I didn't." "Save it," he snapped. For the first time, I saw what she saw in him. Not charm. Not hope. Control. The officer stepped closer. "Sir, if you move 1 inch toward her." Zach finally broke. Not with violence, but with collapse. His legs buckled. He dropped the papers. He covered his face with both hands. "I just wanted one good year," he said. "One thing that didn't fall apart." The officer cuffed him without resistance. Nora cried openly now, not the theatrical kind she'd always weaponized. Real tears. Confused, broken, ashamed. When they let Zach out, the shop felt different. Not safer. Not quieter. Just honest. My father sank into the nearest chair. My mother held her head in her hands. Nora approached me slowly, like I was something dangerous. "I'm sorry," she whispered. For once, she didn't expect forgiveness to be automatic. I nodded. Not yes. Not no. Just acknowledgement. Outside, the police car pulled away, lights off, engine low, like the end of a long episode you're not sure how to feel about. The officer returned, handed me a copy of the report, and said, "You caught this just in time. No press. Just fact." That was enough. When I left the shop, the bell rang behind me. Not obligation. Not ending. The kind that comes after choosing yourself for the first time. I walked to my car, clean, repaired, fully mine. And for a moment the world felt still. Then I smiled. Small. Quiet. Real. Because this time, the math finally made sense.